Greetings and welcome to COMETSA Radio Worldwide, CRW. The mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. We are the mouthpiece of COMETSA. We are streaming live from the city of gold, Johannesburg, Gauteng Province, here in South Africa, Mzansi. Our talk shows are based on the principle called the idea. We inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and support, we associate and network. That's the idea. This is our monthly show called Coaches and Mentors Learning Forum. This is the place where coaches and mentors converge, learn, develop, and grow together. To be part of us, you can apply for individual, corporate, or institutional membership at COMETSAClub.Africa, and we will indeed welcome you to the family. We have this first segment titled Enlightened Leader Coaching, based on the topic that our guest, Rishad Ahmed, specializes in. And this will be followed in the second segment by a conversation on youth mentorship and coaching with the graduates of our youth development through football since 1997, Ndlandla Sevilla and Brian Gegan. That will be another follow-up that is going to be quite very interesting. Yeah, my guest is here. Greetings to you, my friend, Rishad. Welcome to the show. We give you the opportunity to say a few words, greet our listeners, and tell them a little bit about yourself, your organization, Rishad Ahmed Coaching. Over to you, and let's start.
Okay. Well. Thank you very much. First of all, Sam, I'm very honored at your invitation to be on your show, and I'm excited to explore so many opportunities just in our chats beforehand. There's so many things that we align with, and I'm so glad to have met you. So I don't believe in random encounters. I do believe there's a destiny with everyone that we meet. And so in line with that, yes, I've been doing corporate coaching, mentoring, and working with corporates for the last 20 years, so over 2 decades now, from a traditional finance background to mentoring to working with the big names, the big fives, the Accentures and Capgemini, and the amount of names these big fives have changed. You can't keep up with it because we used to call it Arthur Andersen Consulting at one stage, and Capgemini, and then you just add on, 1 plus, and then you end up getting all confused by that. So I come from a corporate background, and then I went on my own journey of self-discovery, and encountered the different teachings from the mystical, you could call it that, or the spiritual dimensions, which was very much lacking in my life from my upbringing. It was always very rational and outward and conquering the world and conquering the corporate ladder, and it's just about conquer, very much a conquer and swipe out of the way everybody that's in your way, even though you don't outwardly say that. It's very much competition driven. And so my life collapsed at some stage in my 30s, and I went on a personal journey to discover myself, which means a lot in many ways. It's not, many people use the term discover yourself in a very broad way, and then they say, oh yeah, well, I've done the discovering myself. I read the book on discovering yourself, and I've discovered myself. In fact, discovering yourself, if it doesn't cause you enormous pain and break your ego into 1,000 bits, you haven't done self-discovery. What you've done is added on to your ego flattery. So that's very important to note. And then I encountered the teachings of the East, namely the teachings of Zen, the teachings from Taoism, or they call it Tao, and then the teachings of the ancient Indians as well, and then the Sufis. from Morocco and Algeria and North Africa and other places as well. So that took me into a huge, long journey, traveling across the Sahara Desert to Japan, to small little cities there, encountering Zen masters, encountering spiritual masters and African spiritual masters as well, shamans from the Amazon and other places. And I got a huge depth of knowledge of the inward world that we tend to ignore, something that goes and extends beyond the senses and perceptions in our mind. And I really connected with that. And from that, I started doing a lot of coaching in that particular way, taking people to their highest essence of themselves. And so the two concepts that I held on to, I ended up writing this book that's done tremendously well. I'm very happy about that. It's called MU, M-U, very, very obscure name, and I'll explain later, which then I implemented, and then now I have a whole team of coaches under me. I have a company called, it originally started out called Zen Coach, which was bringing Zen into coaching, which is this deep awareness and quite a few principles of the Zen monk. In other words, it incorporated a Zen monk understanding of existence and of people, and it was extremely powerful in coaching, and it's something that's lacking in a lot of modern day coaching and advice giving and strategic business advice and all the rest of it. And so I set up Rishad Ahmed Coaching, which has grown very well. My number one client base is UK. I don't work with that many clients. I work with selected clients in South Africa, but I grew up in Australia. So half my life, I left South Africa when I was 12. My family, my father moved from here, and I grew up in Europe, in Portugal, and then I grew up in Australia, and then spent some years in the US and in the UK. And so the UK.
And you are now back home in Cape Town, am I right?
Yeah, I live in Cape Town now. Yeah, so I've been here for 20 years now, and absolutely love South Africa. People in Australia always tell me, "Mike, what are you doing in such a dangerous country?" And I always laugh, and I said, my soul feels alive here. And they get puzzled, like, this guy, is he an idiot or something? Just because his soul feels alive. The thing is, I've chased after outward gratification and the nice beaches and the nice buses and the public transport, and that's all great. There's no knocking all of that. But for me, if it goes against my heart and my soul, and I don't feel at ease within me, then I'm not a happy man. And so I've learned to not ignore that voice inside of me. And so for me, I've been to probably about 70 countries. I mean, I spent half my life in the East, in Thailand, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, and the other half of my life in South Africa. And the ultimate destination for me is the area around Mpumalanga. Wow. So the what they call the Kruger National Park, or the nature reserve around Mpumalanga, my soul feels most alive, and to me it's a direct connection to heaven, whatever heaven represents in your understanding. So that was my journey, and through that I developed an entire system. This was sparked off by AI, artificial intelligence, the area that we have entered. It's not a futuristic thing. We're here now. I'm not interested in the technology. I'm interested in the people as we evolve. We've seen how social media has changed our interactions, our anxieties, the disconnection from families, disconnection from ourselves, most definitely. And because I know how it was to live away from my soul, from my inner voice, from the wisdom that I have innately born with, my natural instincts. And I am from nature. We have this concept that nature's out there and I'm here. No, we are nature. There's no disconnection from that. So then I came up with an entire philosophy and a concept that's been developing over the years, and I created a course around that, which is about Eastern wisdom, bringing in leadership principles and how to live from a very deeply connected source, incorporating many principles. And I took the best of the best. I took the best from Zen. I took the best from the Indian teachings, the best from the Sufis, and incorporated them all into a system that is very, very transformative, and it's been extremely successful. It's not huge. I'm not claiming to be an international superstar, but I make my difference in my own way, and I've got people that trust me and love what I do, and that's most important to me.
And are you bringing I mean, you've done so many from the Eastern, Western philosophies, and anything around African philosophies?
Well, I recently started exploring that in the African context. So to answer that, I looked at how we got the leadership models that is currently being rolled out across the world through the various programs, the certification bodies, and institutions, even in the academic institutions. And I looked at it very carefully and understood that model is based on certain principles, and it's not long enough to go into those principles. But we came out in the West, predominantly the US, the Europe as well, came out of the Industrial Revolution. There was a time when people were treated like machines and people were treated like numbers. We didn't have that problem in the East or in Africa, for that matter. We had different types of issues. So then I started looking at bringing back traditional, not values, but traditional systems. So what was always essential in leadership, in people, in the workplace, in family, in societies, that hasn't changed over time. Because as we enter the age I call the age of AI the age of confusion. So as we enter the age of confusion, people are not going to know what is really going on and what they can say, what they can't say. And I believe a great breakdown in communication is going to occur, and a great breakdown in relationships is going to occur. And once you don't have any relationships, you have nothing as human beings. So then I explored some of the African understandings of this and traditional. You see, traditional can be misunderstood. As soon as you say traditional, people think backward or old, or holding on to sacred values, almost like it's a bad thing. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but the way the term has been perceived. If you mention traditional Eastern wisdom, that sounds cool. But if you mention traditional Christian values, for instance, that doesn't sound cool. So it's not a matter of debate. But so yes, I haven't researched African concepts, but then I looked at it briefly, and I started seeing amongst the tribes of Africa, and it was so similar. And when you explore leadership, communication, organization structures, communication, misunderstandings, conflict resolution, etiquette, it's very similar. If you take the South Americans, you take the Aboriginal cultures, you take all the traditional cultures, even if you take East European before the domination of the Western ideology, it's very, very similar. Different terms meaning different things, but it goes back to the foundations. And so one thing that I always come back to is what people now in the current Western dialogue, if you go to any leadership course or any corporate coaching or any LinkedIn posts, like kindness and compassion and kindness for everybody. And it's this whole song that everybody's singing about kindness, and that leaders need to be kind to their people. And I found that so obscure, because if you take someone an African chieftain from 2,000 years ago, or let's just say 400 years ago, and ask them, do you think it's important to be kind to your people? He'll look at you and say, well, obviously. I mean, what's that? How can you not be kind? Because how do you expect people to follow you unless you're kind? So why is it something we need to teach people to do? To teach people
because for us, it is in us. It is something that you grew up knowing.
Well, everybody does. The only way we can say that we need kindness is because there wasn't kindness. But if you look around, which means that at some point in the West, leadership took a turn for leaders not being kind to their people. But traditional leadership was always based on compassion, on honor, on keeping your word. You didn't need to go online and say we need honesty. It was the only way we operated as a society. As if there was people that were not telling the truth, they were exposed. And they were told, no, you're going to create problems here because you're coming in with one story and you're saying another story. So we don't need to teach people these values. So a lot of this stuff that a lot of, and some of it's very good. There's no doubt to be reminded of it. But we must understand that, as I was mentioning before the show about language and how language can be politicized. And what we're undergoing right now is the politicization of language and weaponization of language. So many terms are used in a very subjective way, like the word kindness. For instance, let me give you a rough example. The word kindness. If you look at kindness in the East toward and versus kindness in the West, in the East, if kindness can be expressed as the student is not behaving in the class, the teacher says, go stand outside. Or the teacher says, you need to leave right now. And the student may say, well, in the West, we call that you're not being kind. And it's not really not being kind. For instance, if in the East, in Japan, using example like traditional Japan, if the young boy says, I'm going out to party all night and I'm 12 years old, and the father says, I'm not letting you leave, that's not in any way unkind. In fact, that discipline is kindness. And if you look at martial arts, for instance, you look at the teachings of Bushido, you look at the samurai, there was strict discipline. There was strict, and sometimes there was minor punishment with a cane. It wasn't like this, beating the crap out of you type of thing. But even in Zen practice, when you're sitting in meditation and you fall asleep, your teacher will come out and tap you on the back and to wake you up. Now people, well, that's outrageous, and then they'll give it all these types of terms. But we have to know where to draw the line, because sometimes kindness means doing things that are not good for you and that you may turn out to be perceived as the bad guy. For instance, as a father, and I'm sure you are as well, if you say to your daughter, I've got 4 daughters, and I'll say, I'm sorry, honey, you're not going out tonight. Oh, but Dad, how can you be so unkind? You see, you can't get me with that, because I know what kindness is. Now leaders are facing a huge backlash over this. They can't say what they want to say because all the words are being twisted around. And in this confusion, it may seem that on the one hand, employees have the upper hand, but we're going to have chaos. We're going to have disorder, and there's going to be no communication. Even if you look at in couples, in relationships as well, at the workplace, nobody's saying what they mean anymore. Everybody's tiptoeing around.
I watched your YouTube video on this topic, and this is the reason why you are here now, because it got me interested. The title itself, Enlightened Leader, and of course the Enlightened Leader Coaching. Will you expatiate on that?
Yeah, sure. So enlightened is a word which in the East, especially in the traditions of Zen, would mean that you would have gotten to the essence of the truth within you. And it's a term that is very much understood without the rational mind, but for the sake of explaining it, it's understanding the oneness of creation. It's understanding that there's no separation, that everything is pretty much of the same essence, if you want to describe it that. But it's not a conceptual thing. It happens through meditation. It happens through sitting for hours in contemplation, and that allows you to awaken inside to the truth, to your truth, to the inner truth. And again, terms are very difficult to describe, and that's why I wrote the book Mu, which is Mu in Japanese. The word means nothingness. So people ask me, "What's the book about?" And I say nothing. And they always find that quite funny, because the word nothingness in the Japanese Mu incorporates everything in existence. So another way of explaining enlightenment is that you have to unlearn. You have to get rid of all your preconceptions, all your biases, all your judgments, all your labels, any idea. Like, for instance, why is blue called blue? Where did that come from? How did you accept that? And if you get rid of that, and we get rid of all the terms, get rid of all the concepts, you get to rewind. In other words, you're getting back to a childlike state. You're not becoming a child, but there's a lot of similarities between a child and an enlightened person, because an enlightened person is not judgmental, is not labeling. It's a person that has incorporated and understood all of themselves. In the language of Carl Jung, until you don't make the unconscious conscious, you will call that fate. So what we have to do is we have to make all our unconscious patterns, our biases, our labels. Like, for instance, I'll say, why do I think that man is an arrogant man? Oh, because of the way he speaks. But is that really arrogance or the way he speaks? You see, so you start questioning within, you start removing all these biases and all these labels. So an enlightened leader incorporates first of all, the understanding of their essence. So his or her essence, which is beyond. So Wayne Dyer says so beautifully, is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. So once you leave the spirit, and whatever spirit means to you is your essential nature, what is in you that is in me is exactly the same. If we term it as far as consciousness, there is this spirit, the soul, this thing behind our perceptions, the skin color, the language that we speak, our mannerisms. Behind all of that, what connects me and you essentially is exactly the same. And they're not duplicates, because if we unite the consciousness, if we want to use the word consciousness, of 7 billion people, there is no differentiation. Consciousness awareness is beyond label, is beyond form. There is no differentiation between my soul and your soul. There is no color, there is no gender, and that's why we get rid of so many problems in the modern day age of confusion. Because what I call you and when I don't call you is immaterial, because what essentially connects us is what we essentially are, and that is pure awareness. So if we combine the awareness of the entire planet and understand that essential nature, we have a very good ground to begin communicating from.
So will then the enlightened leader coaching be a broad theme or framework within which you will conduct coaching to help the leader transform to a point where you could say they are enlightened?
Well, yes, but let me just clarify that, because you see, in the East, or in the traditions of spiritual awareness, nobody claims to be enlightened. It's one of those things you don't talk about. So the reason I talk about it is because it's a goal. But I don't claim to be enlightened, and I don't claim to make other people enlightened. So what it is that you embody the wisdom and assume the form of someone who is enlightened. So we're not claiming to be enlightened, but we're saying is, I'm going to work with leaders to get rid of or unlearn all these things in their mind and in their lives, in order for them to free themselves of limitations. Once you become limited, you can't perform certain functions, you can't operate efficiently. Let me give you an example of a Japanese term called shoshin. Shoshin means the beginner's mind. You see, the beginner's mind is what you assume in your Zen practice. You sit down, even though you sit down every single day and you're sitting there staring at the wall, it may seem mundane. But if you return every day to the beginner's mind, then every experience that you encounter is a brand new awakening. So the Zen master teaches you that when you arise from your meditation, it's like the whole world has been created fresh, brand new, and you learn to live moment by moment. So the moment that you're experiencing right now is extremely brand new. So you approach just with the mindset of beginner's mind, everything becomes a splendor and an experience to encounter life's mysteries from an unconditioned mind, from a mind that's free and flexible. And this practice has been brought and used very powerfully in martial arts, namely in archery. So they say, in the beginner's in the mind of the expert, there are only few possibilities, but in the beginner's mind, the possibilities are limitless. So if you look at a child in the way they see the world, there is this untold amount of dimensions. If you look at people that take psychedelics, for instance, they experience a unified world and they look at unlimited possibilities. And over time, with our conditioning, we start forming a very conditioned, limited perception of existence. So if we adopt the beginner's mind and Shoshin, everything becomes unlimited. So we can approach our work with Shoshin Instead of saying, yeah, yes, yes, I know that. You just show me how to do that. You're saying, show me this again. And if you look at it, even in our daily eating, instead of just looking and go, oh, well, that's eggs and sausages. If you had to unlearn and bring yourself fresh, if you listen to a piece of music, even in relationships, sometimes I do that with my clients as well. I say, approach your staff as if though you've never met them before. Get to experience them entirely fresh and look at the unlimited possibilities that you may have missed in your previous engagement with them.
Mm. Mm. So that's almost like having the attitude of, say, being a perpetual student of leadership, if I may use that term. You say
Precisely.
that you have to have this open mind to as if you are a learner who has never seen what you are going to learn before.
Right, precisely. So you never become an expert. So in other words, you never become enlightened. Yet the goal is enlightened. You see, you're aiming at enlightened leadership, and it's wisdom. So my whole thing is based on wisdom. And now wisdom is very different from knowledge and very different from information. Information is something you digest and you perceive and you understand. Wisdom, on the other hand, is from gained experience. So the path of Zen is the path of lived experience. You are the primary witness. It's not secondary knowledge. So in other words, you learn by yourself and you learn in practice. That's why you don't call someone who's highly informed wise. You call them knowledgeable. But a wise person is someone who's done the same thing so many times. Like Bruce Lee said, I don't fear a man who's practiced 10,000 different kicks. I fear a man who's practiced the same kick 10,000 times.
Wow.
So that is
That's repetition.
Repetition and perfection in that particular way. So, and that brings you to the concept which I'm sure you heard about called Kaizen. And
Yes.
Kaizen comes from Japan, and Toyota has used it very well. Look, Google, all these big companies have implemented what I'm talking about, incorporating mindfulness, awareness, communication, compassionate communication, active listening. It's an entire robust framework that I incorporated. And so Kaizen is a small continuous improvement. And, the famous book by James Clear, Atomic Habits, really highlighted the 1% rule and the 1% improvement. Because again, if you approach it as a beginner's mind, and like Bruce Lee's concept is that you're just constantly improving by 1% every day, you're looking at a 364% or 365% improvement within a year, and those gains are compounded over time. So there's many things that we can learn, especially if we look at the Japanese traditional framework. And it's not to say that it's only available in Japan. It's available across the board. And so for me, the practices or the teachings and understandings of Taoism, now Tao or Tao, T-A-O, as they say it in the West, it's spelled Tao, but it's pronounced Tao. Another word of the Tao would be the great, you could call it the universe, God, all those types of things. So Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu, as he's known, was a man who wrote a book called the Tao Te Ching, which is a book that is over 2,000 years old. So in Lao Tzu, in the beginning of the Tao Te Ching, he says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So anything that you can call it, even though we may say that's God, but then we've put God in a limited framework. Even if we say that's nature, you very limited it. And so the Taoist fundamental teaching is to be the observer of life, to become extremely observant. Many of us are taught to be doers. We're not human beings, we're human doings. So if we started being a human being and learn how to be, you'd start witnessing. So, that's where we have the art of war.
I like that. And in coaching, you say you are being, and so you and I, having spoken earlier on around bringing the African context to coaching, rather than just repeating what we learn as frameworks and models that we get from the Western perspective. I would like you to expand a little bit on that, because I'm very interested in that. Even the book that I've written, I written it from the perspective of an African, Sam Zima, who has learned coaching using the more Western coaching frameworks and models. Nothing wrong with that. But in the application, I feel very strongly that the context where you are practicing this from needs to inform what you bring forward to the client. What's your view on that?
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad. And I only recently found out that you've written this book, and I think it's going to be so valuable. And, one of the things that people, generally speaking, in very large corporations, sometimes I wonder if they want to actually change or they just want to maintain the status quo. A lot of terms have changed and a lot of concepts have changed, but if you look at what they're actually doing, how many leaders, especially in conventional, traditional companies that have become monoliths and been around forever, I think they're just using different terms. And so, I agree with you. This is foundational, and it has to be led by the people saying, we're African. And we have African unique situations here. And we didn't come from your baggage. So don't offload your baggage onto us. Because we came from a framework, and I regard myself extremely African, and I'm very proud to be African. And for me, African is whatever this land is. And if you look at it, every human being actually is African and originated in Africa, if you look at the genetic studies of where we all originated. However, Africa has tremendous value, and we can't be ignoring that. And it's great that we've got a framework that is very Western orientated. But like I said about the term of compassion and empathy and kindness, these things were inculcated in African culture. They were inculcated in traditional cultures spanning generations. And if you go back before the Industrial Revolution and the big Great Depression in Europe, they were the same thing. We had the traditional, we had the markets, we had the traditional handing down of techniques from master to student. It was a very different market back then. And so in the corporate framework, if you look at it from a tribal point of view, you can apply so many different rules and structures around this. And it may even be a sweeter, more compassionate and more fitting model than just saying, okay. And if you look at even with medicine, right? If you look at Western medicine compared to, for instance, if you look at the Sangomas and you look at traditional healers across the world, they've been sidelined in many ways. But you see, there's the approach of let's fix the problem. And then there's another approach that says, what created the problem? Yeah. Now, if you look at the African framework and your traditional framework, if you look at even Ayurveda, which is the Indian method of medicine, and if you look at the traditional Chinese medicine, it is all about the environment. So it's very much in line with your topic as well. We can't be putting a framework in an environment that doesn't work. It's like eating pineapples in Alaska. It's going to mess up your system, right? Because the pineapples did not originate and don't grow in that climate. So if we come in with an entire model that's saying this is what leadership is and this is what our people are going to do, it's going to form a mismatch, because who are these people? Even if you look at now with the general African population, us eating the American concept of a balanced diet. It's not very balanced, but let's say we take the diet. It does not suit these conditions. Like, for instance, in the Middle East, where I do a lot of work, they got the second highest rate of diabetes in the world because their diet is now, the environment has changed. They're living in air conditioning. But if you look at the traditional desert Arabs, they were in this heat that's 50 degrees plus Celsius. They're out, walking for thousands of miles. Of course, they're going to be eating this rich, drinking rich camel milk and eating very nourishing, very, huge feasts. But now if you take that into the modern day Dubai, you can't be eating like that. And it's the same way. If you look at the African context with our issues that we're facing here, it requires, and I always look at in how in traditional townships, how there is a law of their own. They have to take it to their own hands in that way. And of course, some of it is violent. I get that. But the other ways of them instituting a community-based approach where everybody's there to help everybody else, and the wise elders are still listened to. In many traditional African cultures, there's no place for old people anymore. People, that's you, and so beautiful. Carl Jung said there must be a reason why God made us grow to become old, because there's something in us for us to impart. Otherwise, we would just be born, be in the peak of our lives, and then drop off. You see that Lion Kingdom, for instance, they don't live to be very old so they can sit around telling the other lions, you should watch this and you watch that. And there's so much to learn from the animal kingdom, which African cultures ingrained in them to observe the animals. And if you look at the Eastern cultures, Kung Fu, Tai Chi is all based on animal movements as well. And so we look at our food, we look at even the Khoisan, right? The traditional people of this country, their methods, their ideologies, their ways of hunting. A lot of the Western companies have come and patented some of the herbs and potions that Africans have been using for millennia here too. So there's a lot Africa has to offer, not just to Africa, but to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. In the ICF, the International Coach Federation conferences and seminars, online on face-to-face, there is always an outcry for the African input into where coaching is going, because coaching is evolving. It's not like we have arrived, and we certainly, with our input, don't know where it's going to land. But you and I seem to be saying we have to see the Africa's input into whatever coaching is going to become.
Absolutely. I totally, and I'm so glad that you're doing this, because I think it's extremely important that we bring this in. And as long as we're grounded in what we're presenting to the world, that's what's most important. And I think it should be the case in the future that these large organizations come to us saying, what can you teach us? Because you have a lot of wisdom and it seems to be working. And I think African companies need to take this on and then teach the world how this can work. But we have to believe in our people and in our coaches, and the books that you're writing and the things that we're doing. But it can't be us going to big forums saying, please listen to us because we're African. It should never be like that in the first place. Because I don't think one is, but of course they have the bigger trademarks and they have the bigger, marketing machines around that as well. But I really think we need to, as African people, bring that wisdom into our daily lives.
Yeah.
And that has to be ground up. It can't just be, us conceptualizing as
absolutely,
as
which is what I think listening to you is what you have experienced as you travel the world. In the East, they have not pushed back Western theories and philosophies, but they have brought up theirs. And they are Toyota, for instance, is a global company, and they apply those models all over the world. They're integrating them. So we are not saying that we have to push back the other theories and philosophies from somewhere in the world, but we say we have to bring ours to be in par with those and integrate if possible, right?
Yes, and I would go one step further, and I would say that ours needs to be up ahead and then
Yeah,
integrate. So you have, but in order to do that, Sam, what's very important that we need to understand what makes our culture, upbringing, traditional values, and all these ways of communicating effective leadership, and even how we eat,
yeah,
how we establish relationships, how we are with our families in this way. Because if you look at it, in the traditional Japanese, in a Japanese man who goes into the company and he would do his ICF coaching and he would go to the US and learn, go and get his degree from Harvard and all the rest of it. They would come back home and then see what can fit into and what they need to do. And if you look at Samsung and all these companies as well, we lead with our base. And I think it's very important for Africans to relearn what they already have. There's
yeah.
so much that they have, and there's not enough of that.
I wanted exactly on that point. I wanted to say that for us, we wouldn't be learning anything new, but it will be inculcating something that's in us. We just happen to have forgotten about it, or
Yes,
it has
yes.
just been we have just been made not to bring it forward, right?
Right. And if you look at our educational system, that's a primary example of that, because it's not being passed down in that. If you look at, you spent a lot of time in Germany as well, and if you look at Rudolf Steiner,
Yeah,
in that particular model of the Steiner model of school, of course, now it's become in South Africa, it's one of those elite of the elite places that you can go. But this practical learning as you go along type of education. Like some of the influencers online are saying, with the birth of AI, traditional schools, universities are redundant. There's not going to be a place for that because, if you look at generative AI and what's going on right now, they can do everything that you can do in a flash. Like I said, I'm going to be talking at that conference that's coming up in Johannesburg, and the theme is mediocrity is unacceptable. You
Yeah.
see, if you can't just cut and paste, and you can't just say what everybody else is saying, because generative AI can do that in a flash. You just go onto ChatGPT, type in the thing, and it will produce you a document far superior than what you can produce yourself. So then where does that leave you? You're going to be so innovative. And Sam, that's where it connects to bringing in this framework. And for me, what's so vital from the Eastern wisdom and from the African wisdom, you see, there's something in the African wisdom, in the ancient traditions, which is getting in touch with your body, not just your
Yes.
mind. We're very focused on our mind. If you look at African rites and rituals and dance and music and drums, all these types of things, if you look at the shamans and you look at the South American cultures, in how they move and how they perform and how they shake. Basically, what you're doing is you're shaking your mind out of the way, because your
Mm,
mind is what's creating the problems. And in the East, they do that through different rituals. And of course, there's the practice of meditation, where you're stilling the mind so that
mm,
you can awaken your inner voice, your guiding light, your intuition and creativity, which comes from what I call infinite intelligence. We all have access to these dimensions within us. But if we're just reading books all the time and cutting and pasting what every leadership book says, we're not learning on the fly. When an individual walks in and they're encountering a situation, you don't go to chapter 6 on communication. You look at the man in the eye or look at the woman and say, you connect with them soul to soul, and you connect to them deeply within your innate knowing of. I
mm,
was training a coach today, and she was saying, just repeating stuff from the coaching manual, and I said, no, connect with this other person, connect
mm.
deeply with, and forget about, of course, there's no problem with the overview. I'm all for traditional, education and the frameworks and all the rest of it, but we can't stop there. It's like medicine begins with your degree. It does not end there. That's your
Yeah.
foundation. But then you have to look at your environment. You have to look at preventative maintenance. You have to look at optimizing the individual in that environment. They're all very important as well.
Beautiful. There's an input from one of our colleagues who is listening on the other side,
Yeah.
Louisa Murudi. She is HR expert specifically in the recruitment space. She's writing here, and I'll read it for you. What are the global trends regarding coaching? Are you finding it is more organization based, where companies call in coaches to support their strategies, or individuals seeing the need for their own growth and development?
That's an excellent question. Me being predominantly, my two biggest markets are the US and the UK, it's definitely the second option, where individuals are saying, and that's why when on LinkedIn, got quite a large presence onto LinkedIn, and people connecting, employees and individuals, leaders connecting to me saying, and a lot of the times the corporate budgets are tailored for specific types of coaching interventions that may not necessarily lead to where the individual wants to go. And so they're forcing companies to say, listen, we should have our coaching budget or our self-development budget to shape the way that we want to shape it, rather than going into very much of a cookie cutter mindset. We want something else. We want something fresh. We want something dynamic that will transport us and take us to our highest dimensions of living within ourselves. So yes, I think that the change is definitely happening towards individuals reaching out and wanting coaches.
Mm. And I think it makes sense, and that's the best way to approach it, because it's an individual recognizing that they need coaching, and then of course the company then providing the resources for them to do that.
Yes, that would be in the ideal dream scenario. That's it. But what I find a lot of the times is that individuals have to put their hands into their own pockets, because it doesn't conform exactly to company requirements and specifications of what training is. A lot of these companies, Of course, the larger companies do have some flexibility, but generally out there, it's difficult because they'll say, well, how does this training benefit us? And so if you're going on this training, how do we see a direct benefit? Because sometimes that's why they use their own money as well, because they're saying, Rishad, I'm not really happy at this company and I want to reach my full potential, and I don't believe this company is allowing me to do that. So in that way, what are you going to do? Now, of course, and that's why you find a lot of coaches who get employed by companies, they won't say those things. So they don't be totally honest with their clients. They'll be like, well, why can't you do that within this company? Which is a valid question. But sometimes the answer is this: you're not going to get what you want to be in this company. So it's a mixed bag. And for me, authenticity is most important. And as a coach, if you can't speak your truth and you have an alternative agenda, I think people can smell that coming a mile away, and you can't win. Even though you're thinking, I'll retain my coaching gig, you're not going to retain it.
Absolutely.
Me over and over again saying to me, Rishad, I can't believe, I went up to this one guy and I said to him, if you don't leave your wife, and this was in the very extreme case, and is a dear friend of mine, I said, you're going to end up in a big situation here because I've coached both of you, and you're going to both end up, I'm not going to say killing each other, but you're going to really sabotage your growth. And no other coach or even therapist that were in therapy for 20 years could boldly say that. And I said, it's because I just am deeply concerned for you. They've implemented many changes, and instead of them saying, well, we never want to see you again, they saw the pure intention that I had in what I was saying. And I don't advise people to go around saying you should leave your boss and you should do this, because coaching is not about advising.
Yes.
And that's the first level I teach my coaches, is that you're not there to give advice. You're not there to tell people what to do. But it was a very different individual case that I'm using, an isolated example.
Beautiful. And another friend of ours and colleague and associate, Dr. Kuma Mangiza, says, can it be because the HR executives sitting in the table aren't given the opportunity to suggest such coaching interventions, or they fear to suggest such?
I don't know the answer to why the HR departments do that or the other. I'm not qualified to. I can only tell you from isolated examples, but I'm no expert on why they decide and how they. It's a valid question and a very good. If we knew that answer, it would make us being able to be more effective to employees and leaders a lot more easier. But I think it's very much related to each individual HR person, department, company structure, and sometimes they're just implemented mundane, redundant policies from the 1900s, and they've just continued in that. They haven't really broken that framework. And if I may add, I find that's why I don't work with South African companies as much, is because they're still very much towing the line. You see, in the West, in the US and the UK, I come in and say, look, this model hasn't worked for you guys. You know that. That's why you're coming to see me. You want something different. Whereas in South Africa, many of the, traditional, if you want to call it traditional, I don't know what's another word for it, but they're like, no, that's fine for us. Thanks very much. Because they're not really interested in transforming people. I mean, I saw some of these leadership gurus going to talk around, and they're just spewing out the same crap that the American, gurus are spewing out. And I challenged one of the, the famous gurus out here. And, he was saying that we need to employ the best of the people and pay them more and give them everything and let them do whatever they want. And I said, if you look at your average South African entrepreneur, he or she has got five or six employees, and they got a limited budget. Are you telling me they're going to spend their money to pay 3 times more to get the best of the best? And if you, as an entrepreneur, if you don't batten down the hatches and watch every single move, Sam, you're an entrepreneur yourself. If you're not watching every single move of your staff and guiding them, you can't be letting people do whatever they want. So the two things are very, of course, if you have, like, for instance, a budget of $100 million and a VC that's backing you up to a couple of billion, you can say, right, well, I want the best of the best and let them run the department. That advice is very valid, but not in a limited small business context. And I think people dispense this wisdom as if though it can be applied. And like you said, Sam, it's about where you're applying the knowledge to, and the context, the environment is extremely important. And so we can't be this cut and paste catchy lines and catchy symbols, and like we throw this word servant leadership everywhere. But if you look at the Eastern understanding of servant leadership, it's very different to what the Western understanding is.
Mm, mm. Wow. We have 10 minutes to go. I want to cover a few points, and one is I'm fascinated by your bringing AI closer to leadership and the work you're doing in that space. And I think if you can also expand it a little bit about the workshop that you are going to run. I've seen the details of it, and I'm sure the listeners here in Gauteng might be very keen to come and join in your workshop. But yeah, AI and leadership.
Yeah, so for me, I see the coming age of AI, like I mentioned, the age of confusion, and I believe it's very important for people, companies, leaders to become very aware of the technology, and also to learn to be able to transform how you engage with work and with individuals as well. So I did a video on it, and maybe if you have a group or somewhere, I can share the link of my concerns. My concern is about the people in AI. Everybody is contacting me now because I'm the AI transition specialist. That's my official title. I help companies transition individuals and human beings transition through the age of AI. And people are saying, oh, do you want to collaborate with me and talk about this new AI technology? No, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in how the humans, because if we saw what happened with social media, we didn't get a chance to prepare. Human beings are not ready for social media. They're not ready for the newest technology. We see people staring at their screens for 16 hours a day, and I don't think that is useful in any way, and it's unavoidable. But can we be a little smarter this time? Because AI is social media on steroids. Imagine a movie specifically designed for you. It's not a movie you go watch at the cinema. The movie, the actors, the scene, the sketch, the scenarios is customized exactly to your taste. Don't tell me you're going to be able to turn that off. The social media is nowhere near customization. So what I talk about in this workshop, which is done in collaboration with Simone Zanetti, and we're doing this all over the world, in Rome, in Milan, starting off in Joburg, we're doing Pretoria, Johannesburg, Durban, then Cape Town, and then we're going to a few other countries around the world. And so he'll be talking about AI and how to use that in your business, which is legitimate. We're not against AI in any way. We're saying use AI. And so I'll be talking about how to prepare our teams for upping our game, because mediocrity in the workplace is not going to be acceptable, because your boss is not going to hesitate to get rid of you. And I'm not trying to be facetious here, but if a generative AI like ChatGPT can do the tasks that it's doing now, and we're at iteration GPT-4 and GPT-5 is coming very soon, your role is not very secure. So you're going to have to learn to become highly creative, highly innovative, and become very sharp. And communication is going to be very important as well. And those are some of the topics that I'm going to be discussing. And I hope it makes a difference, because ultimately I have a great passion for people.
I'll certainly share the details of the workshop on the group. And Rishad, I've added you to the Coaches and Mentors Learning Forum group. You can share that video onto that group.
Okay.
I think colleagues will appreciate that. And I wanted also to check with you whether research, coaches don't do much other than coaching, but I think we need to start thinking around research. If we are going to bring this African context or methodologies into the coaching space, we're going to have a challenge of research, even though we know these things work. But when you bring them into the academic space and you don't back them up with research, you're going to be challenged. And that therefore says that as coaches, we can never arrive. We have to bring the academic into it. What is your view on that?
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that we need to come up with legitimate use cases. And because ancient wisdom, for instance, in the Eastern cultures, it was something that I had to do myself. So it's a very relevant topic that I know something about. And I looked into companies like Google and other companies as well who have implemented some of this Eastern wisdom as well. So I think defining exactly what that is and aligning that very synergistically with what is currently being captured by the broader corporate context would make it easy for us to enter that type of domain. So in other words, by showing how, for instance, mindfulness, was practiced in Africa versus over there. We can, or in the East, and we can look at, for instance, how leadership and honor, dignity, commitment, honesty, integrity was practiced in African context. And then we compare that to the East. And on top of that, something unique about the African people that are working in these companies here, highlighting their specific needs and requirements and their cultural input as well. And then seeing why African leadership styles and incorporating the whole model would be more synergistically fit into it. And of course, we're not negating anything useful, beneficial, AI, all the different leadership frameworks can all come in as well. So it's another thing that would be a wonderful add-on to simply increase productivity, happiness at work, and long-term sustainability of employee and manager relationships.
Beautiful. We're left with 4 minutes. Let's try and fit in what is left. I want you to sum up and also tell our listeners how they get hold of you, how they can connect with you before we lose the time.
Well, in summary, my method on enlightened leadership is about bringing in Eastern wisdom, traditional wisdom, and ancient wisdom that we incorporated from all cultures. And my framework allows us to incorporate anything that you've heard and learned from your cultures and from your past into this framework by incorporating it and then using a very robust framework. The number one thing we're going to need in the future is resilience and adaptability. And if we can't adapt, we're going to fail. And if you look at the number one epidemic of the future, according to the World Health Organization, is depression. And they say that's going to be the leading cause of death, far surpassing everything else. And that's as a result of depression. So people are not thriving right now. The tradition, the model that is currently implemented on how we live and the values and what gives us happiness needs a reshuffle. So for me, it's about each individual and each leader discovering themselves very well, understanding all their biases, and bringing together their teamwork and their collaboration in a way with this framework that I've developed. And I'm so excited about sharing all my teachings and learnings from all these people that I've encountered all over the years. So I'm excited to bring this to the South African context as well. And we're rolling this out to, quite a few companies internationally.
Beautiful, beautiful. You are on the WhatsApp group that I've added you there so they can see that. Drop your details in that WhatsApp group. I will really, when you are here, when is the workshop?
The dates are on the thing. I can't remember. The
Okay,
15th
all right,
of
great
July or
stuff. We'll
22nd.
definitely want to engage with you when you are here in Gauteng. Maybe even have some coffee with some few members of COMETSA and Associates,
I'd love to.
and
I'd
just
love
to
to, Sam.
exchange viewers. And I really believe, as you and I have said, we'll definitely look at more things together.
Yeah, no, definitely. And if they do anyone wants to get a hold of me right now, they can do that to go to rishadahmed.com, or you can just type in Rishad Ahmed Coaching into Google, and that will also lead you to my website.
Beautiful. I hope you are going to be able to listen to the next segment because we're going to share some real practical examples from colleagues that have been part of our journey that are now practitioners in their own right in the business world. And that is Nhlanhla Sevilla, who is an entrepreneur based in Newcastle in the KZN, and Brian Gegana, who works for SAMSA, South African Maritime Safety Association. Interesting stuff indeed. And I think I'm checking if there are some more input. I saw someone pre-typing something. I'm just mindful of time. But yeah, so that was great. I think we can have some follow-up in the future. Colleagues, listeners, thank you so much. That was COMETSA Radio Worldwide addressing the Coaches and Mentors Learning Forum. We have lined up some great stuff once a month. This program is presented to you. We are growing together in that way. Please don't go away. As I said, we really want to hear from our own graduates from the COMETSA Youth Development through Football, who are now business people, entrepreneurs, and they have some exciting stories to share with us. Rishad, thank you so much. Don't go away. Just stay in the studio. I'm just thanking you officially. in the presence of our listeners. We really appreciate your time. You have really ignited some energy in us. We're looking forward to engaging with you further. Somebody